Got some clarity on the offset language, the contract for Damian Lillard. What are the Bucks on the hook for? What does that cap look like? And more in a busy offseason coming up next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia. You can hear me throughout the season on the Bucks Radio Network. Bonus edition coming your way today as we're joined by Van Faez of BrewHoop to try to dig into what Camille and I talked about on the show Friday with Damian Lillard's deal being offset and joining the Portland Trailblazers. So we think we have the answer. Had to lean on Van and Bobby Marks and a few others for this, but we think we have the clarity now. And it's basically what we assumed. Am I right there, Van? And what Frank kind of talked about too. Well, actually, no. So it's yes and no. It kind of covers both. So it is actually a $20.2 million cap hit that it will become, but that's not until is it the new season begins next year, the new league year, or after the regular season ends? I know Bobby Marks said. So it's not immediately. Like, it doesn't turn right now into a $20.2 million cap hit.
Right. It is $22.5 million now, and it will be through next June, as I understand it, after talking to Bobby a little bit today. Basically, the reason is if he were to get waived, then they would by Portland and stretched like the Bucks did to him, which isn't going to happen. But if that did happen, there would be another calculation that would have to be done. But essentially, at the end of, I guess, the league year after the regular season, that's usually when tax payments tax payments are calculated based on a team's salary at the very end of the regular season. So in April, and this calculation is made sometime around then too, but the adjustment won't happen until June because there's still a waiver period. I believe that goes like after the end of the regular season too. And then waivers kind of close. Regardless, he will be for the cap hit for Dame is going to be the $22.5 million that we had previously figured out because that's what the $112.6 million in 2 years left on his now previous deal that was being waived and stretched over 5 seasons. Now it's going to be 22.5 until June, and then it's getting reduced to 20.2, and it's going to be that until 2030. So essentially, like, if the Bucks were to finish like against the tax line or an apron or something, which is, I don't think is even remotely
barring
possible
something
right
remarkable,
now.
In February.
Right, exactly. I don't know how they would at this point be able to add enough salary to get even close to a tax line. I'm not sure if it's even legal by the salary matching rules. But let's say somehow they did. If they were over the tax by like $1 million or $2 million, then this calculation would happen and they would go under, or an apron or something like that. So ultimately, it doesn't do anything, like you and Camille were saying, as far as their roster building abilities. It's just some money that they save over, I think, the course of the waived and stretched period. They're saving, it amounts to about $11.5 million over that original span of 5 years through 2030. So that might come in handy in a future season. I don't expect the Bucks are going to be paying the tax next season either in 2026, 27, because not because they're not close or they're far away from the threshold, but because if they're not paying the tax this season and they don't pay the tax next season, then the repeater count is reset. You have to finish below the tax in at least 3 of the previous 4 seasons in order to not face repeater penalties. So they could then go into the tax in 2027, 28, and they wouldn't pay the repeater penalties, which is something they've been doing now for, I guess, 5 years, because they've been in the tax since the first time they went in the tax was right after they won the championship because it triggered some unlikely benefits, I think, in Drew Holiday's contract.
Yep.
Anyway, so it might come in handy to get them under an apron or something in the future, but probably not prior to 2027.
Yeah, so we should also point out today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Our friends over at Game Time presenting today's show. Yeah, I mean, look, every little bit counts and helps, but as we were talking about before, and I think Camille and I mentioned on the show prior to this as well, I mean, 2 point whatever it is $1 million. Sure, it gives you a little bit of flexibility, but that's not make or break for what the Bucks are. Oh, this opens up so many things for us now.
No, the Bucks right now, prior to this contract, and right now, it's the same situation for them. They've already used their cap space that they created by waiving Dame Lillard, as we know, to sign Myles Turner. And then they used part of their room exception because they didn't get the full mid-level because they created cap room. They got instead $8.8 million instead of the 14.1 you get as the mid-level. And they used, I believe, 5.1 of that on signing Kevin Porter Jr. So they have left on that about 3.7 million. And that's like they could use that to sign a free agent, but that is not too much different than a lot of players' minimum contracts.
Yeah.
If you were to sign a 10-year veteran right now to a minimum contract, the Bucks would only be paying him $2.3 million because that's the portion that's not reimbursed by the league.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. But then, that player is actually going to be making like 3.6 million, depending if they're like 9-10 years of service on up. So really just amounts to kind of a minimum deal. And that was the same thing before this signing, or this Portland signing, I should say.
Yeah.
So really nothing has changed here as far as what the Bucks can do this offseason in the 2025-26 season. Really at any point in the foreseeable future, it doesn't make a true difference. It's just a little bit more relief from dead salary each year between now and 2030. That's what it is. Yikes.
Yeah. It just makes it easier to spend instead of rounding up to roughly $25 million in dead cap space. You can now say, hey,
it'll be 20.2
8 months from now. It's $20 million in dead cap space that we have. So there's
for Dame, but they still have some for Vasily Micic too. So
yeah.
For the next couple of years, it's going to end up around 20.8 million, and then it'll be 20.2 the following 2 years.
So I don't want to turn this totally into Dame Lillard. But it was interesting to see his landing spot. So I want to get your thoughts on that. We haven't talked on the pod, at least, since the Myles Turner signing. So I know you guys covered that at Brew Hoop, but get your reactions to that. And one interesting tidbit that came out in the afternoon on Friday as well, not necessarily sourced reporting, but a couple of NBA media figures saying, if I was Cam Thomas, I'd target these two teams. So we'll get into that conversation coming up after this. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Game Time, and we've all been there, logging on early, waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale. Remember back in the day when you had to actually go to a physical storefront, and then you lose your spot in line, physically or online, and you miss out on the tickets to the event you were dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, and those memories should not be dealing with the stress it took to get those tickets. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. The prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. If you've grown tired of endless scrolling trying to find the best deal, well, Game Time's Zone Deals pick the best seats for you in your section. And maybe you wondered what the venue is going to look like before you buy those tickets. Well, their app shows you a panoramic seat view, so there's no surprises come showtime. And with Game Time, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees or sticker shock once you get to checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Damian Lillard going back to Portland. I know we all kind of talked about it at the time when he was waived and stretched and said, yeah, well, I shouldn't say all of us. I know I felt this way and a few others too. I just hope he goes back to Portland, like finish it there, be around your family, have the prodigal son returns. And that's what happened. The mid-level exception is basically what he got. And I think the interesting thing that Camille and I touched on is I still think, and I'm curious your thoughts, the wave and stretch is going to become more common. Then it's not necessarily every team's going to do it every year or every other year, but it's not, I think it's not going to be like no team does that. I think you're going to start to see, like we have the dead cap conversations in the NFL. I think this is going to become a thing under this CBA, but it is worth noting. I mean, Bradley Beal and Dame are the two big ones. These guys aren't signing for minimums, which everybody tossed out there of like, well, he's already getting paid. So if he can sign for the minimum, why not? That's the interesting part. So for Dame to go back to Portland and get basically the mid-level for a team that already has a crowded backcourt, already brought in a veteran that people kind of questioned of, wow, this is an interesting move in the backcourt. And now you're adding one more into the mix for a player that they've all but said is not going to play this season. Between, I think Windhorst pointed out, between DeAndre Ayton and Dame, the Blazers are going to have over $40 million in money tied up to guys not playing for them, or at least not playing this season. As much of a good story as it was, were you surprised at all for those reasons that he still wound up back in Portland?
No, I wasn't too surprised. We knew he still made his home there. His family was still there, his kids and everything. I figured he was going to be spending like all of next year just rehabbing.
Yeah.
And it sounded like even if the Bucks had wanted to retain him, they were actually going to allow him to do that too. Yeah. There were some people who were saying that he wasn't going to be allowed to do that, but then Dame himself came out and said,
Dame himself said, no, not true.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's a great situation for him, obviously. Yeah. I think as far as how it looks for Portland, I mean, yeah, I don't know exactly how much they have. I didn't see exactly how much they have for in dead money for Ayton right now, but they didn't have to stretch that out because his contract was expiring. So this is just kind of a 1-year thing for them.
Deal. Yeah.
So not such a big deal. It's not like they've got his salary stretched out over a bunch of seasons after this. So and for them, you know, they were well under the tax. Even with this signing, they're well under the tax. And big deal right now if you're an up-and-coming team in the West having to pay $40-some million for two guys who aren't playing for your team. One of them is on your roster. The other one is on the Lakers. I think with the state of that franchise being one of the up-and-coming teams in the West, it's really not that big a deal. Their cap sheets are going to be clear. By the time they might want to, you know, use that flexibility to make a big move. But they're probably not there yet, right?
Well, the conversation is next year with what do we do now with the Drew Holiday contract, because it's not pretty. No. But, you know, the Dame, for a number of reasons, obviously his ties to the community team and fan base, which is kind of funny. Look, I get it's not an apples to apples comparison, but it is funny to see this being championed from the same group of people that are saying, well, Giannis needs to leave Milwaukee. But next year is going to be the interesting part. And what do they do with Drew Holiday? And, also Blazers are up for sale. And Adam Silver, I don't remember if he bluntly said, he at least tiptoed around it in his most recent press conference. They need a new arena. How do you continue to drum up fan interest? Well, let's bring back arguably the greatest player in franchise history and have him back here.
That's a great arena. I've been there. It's a fantastic arena. It's just from, I guess, like 1995 or something, which you know, you and I were around then. We're going to get replaced too under the current the current state of the NBA. Regardless, I think it's great. It's a great situation for Portland, obviously, because like they have now recouped. They trade away Damian Lillard. They got a first from the Bucks, 2 swaps from the Bucks. They got
those swaps with the Myles Turner inclusion or addition. Now, who knows? But you still at least have that lottery ticket,
right?
But
it's
you at least have a first too.
Yeah. They could. So that's a possibility for them. But they got a first, and then they turned around and traded Drew Holiday for Robert Williams. And did they get 2 firsts out of Boston for that, or was it just 1 and a swap? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
Regardless, they got a bunch of draft assets and
Williams. You get Drew Holiday, you get and turn that into Robert Williams. You get Tumani Kamara.
And Kumara too, or Tumani Kamara too. Yeah, I forgot about him. It's like you've and you get Drew Holiday back too, right? It's like you get both players just 2 years later when they're older. One of them has a new contract, which is not so good, but you've got all of this other draft capital that you received for kind of taking that on. And Williams, they could turn around and trade for something too. I think he's in the last year of his contract as well. And of course, they've got now Young Hansen and Donovan Clingan there in the front court. So I imagine that will be it'll be a gift that keeps on giving for them. If not assets from the Bucks, it will be assets from someone else.
Yeah, it's interesting for Scoot Henderson, who's in the final year of his end of the deal. They have a team option for him for next season.
They'll pick that up, I'm sure. Yeah,
I would assume, but it is probably a little discouraging of like, okay, I got the rationale for Drew Holiday, but now you're bringing in, and he's not going to play next year, but now you're bringing in another guy in Damian Lillard for me back there in the backcourt. Yesterday, a lot of the chatter was around, well, certainly the Blazers would be looking to move on from Drew Holiday then, because it's about $105 million that's owed to him over the course of the next 3 seasons. Again, Dame, I don't think they said this bluntly, but they all but said Dame is not going to play this year, and he's just going to use the year to rehab. So this isn't like we got to get rid of Drew Holiday now. Any movement there, I would assume, would be next summer. For all the calls of if the Blazers move on from him, bring back Drew Holiday. I loved Drew Holiday as much as everyone else here and recognize how impactful and important he was to that championship. But the edict all offseason from Camille and I and a lot of us that have covered this team is Giannis should probably be the oldest player on this team. Next year, Drew Holiday will be 36 years old and has already started to show some signs of decline. If you could get him for the minimum, that's a different discussion. But as we touched on earlier, I know it's not a huge sample size, but you're not seeing guys bought out take the minimum, because that's basically a double whammy there, that you're wearing the scarlet letter of waived and stretched, and now you're making yourself a minimum player.
Right. And it's worth pointing out that like Bradley Beal, he had to give up a bunch of money in this buyout. And
so
even with him
under the 15%.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So like the Suns had some dead money on their coffers already, I think, prior to the waiting stretch for Beal. So they had to get him to give up, I think it was something like 3 to 4 million off of whatever he had left on his deal. I think it was about the same as what Dame had left. Like 2 years, $115 million, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, they were already close to like 4 million because they waived and stretched Nasir Little, and then
that's what they had. That's what they had. Oh, EJ Liddell, watch out for him in summer league right now. But that's another story. I think, yeah, like these guys aren't going to be signing minimum deals if they're having to do that, because like for Beal, he gets the taxpayer mid-level from LA. So he's going to get 11 million out of that. But I think actually, you know what? I think it was like 3 to 4 million per year. And it was like, I remember tweeting about this a couple weeks ago saying like, I don't think that the Bucks are going to be able to sign him because there were a lot of rumors that, you know, the Bucks were interested in him. And I think it would have been an interesting fit, but the Bucks would have only been able to give him that 3.7 million that we had talked about earlier. And the most you could give him in the following year after that on a raise is going to be about 3.8. So like we're looking at like a $7.5 to $8 million deal for Bradley Beal over 2 years. And he's giving up like 13 or so on the total remaining value of his deal. Like even with signing that contract in Los Angeles, he's in the red here
not whole.
Compared to what he not agreed to a buyout and he just said to Phoenix, screw you, like you're paying me my salary, even if I'm not playing for you, he would have made more money. Now Dame, on the other hand, it's different. Like he's giving back money because, I mean, in a way, it's not like he's having to actually give up money in this deal, but the Bucks won't be paying him. They'll be paying him, you know, 11 million less over the rest of this,
the course of
this
it,
5-year stretch period. But so instead of getting that 112.6 million he would have on the previous waived and stretch contract, right now he's going to get more like 101. But you add in, he's getting a 3-year, $42 million contract on it. He's going to get, you know, 143 million between now and 2030. In the first 3 years, he's going to be getting 13 to 14 million from the Blazers. So he comes out just fine. He's getting
70 million this year to not play.
Right. Well, it's more like, I think 35 or so. It's like 33, 34. But still like pretty good deal, right? He's just not getting I guess would have been 145 million because he, you know, 42 million on top of the 112 or 43, whatever, on top of the 112 he was already owed. So he's getting a little bit less than that, but he's doing fine. And I can imagine like he wouldn't have accepted a minimum in this situation because his even though like the calculation, I won't bore you with how that set off is calculated as far as like how it's determined that the Bucks are paying 11.5 million less. Basically they pay 2.3 million a year, but that all depends on what salary he's getting from Portland. And let's say he didn't take 13 million and he took instead 5 million, then that set off is going to be lower. And he's even though Milwaukee will be paying him more because the set off is lower, he's not making as much money because like that $42 million it's not getting him all the way to, you know, what I say 140 or 42 prior to that. Yeah. Like this works out better for him this way.
So the big splash tied to the Dame wave and stretch, the signing of Myles Turner. Your thoughts on that move, the roster that we've seen assembled here for Jon Horst, some other things that he had to say to Eric Name in his interview with him, and we'll check in on Cam Thomas as well. We'll do that next. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Open Phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need. Maybe you needed a plumber or some other service provider. If the first person you called didn't answer, you probably didn't wait. You moved on, and that's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone's the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. It lets you manage business calls and texts from a single app, have a shared inbox feature that proves to be a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat, and their AI agent handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer. Open Phone is offering our listeners 20% off for your first 6 months at openphone.com openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. So let's go back. What? It's July 18th. So however many days ago, 2.5 weeks ago already, when
18 days.
You see the tweet come through. The Bucks are signing Myles Turner to a 4-year deal. And I just remember getting several messages that were all basically, wow. And thinking, okay, who just signed somewhere? And then seeing that news come about. And I mean, my immediate thought was, wow, so they're doing a sign and trade with Indiana.
Me too.
And then moments later, we get the Dame news. Again, not to get into comparing things. We talked about the optics around. Great story for Dame to be back with the team he should be with, but same people pushing for Giannis to leave Milwaukee. Similar conversation too of reeks of desperation. Why are the Bucks carrying that much dead space? And well, the Suns had to do it to avoid the tax and get some more flexibility. Look, I don't think either of us are going to deny there's a decent chance this comes back to bite you in the last 2 years, 3 years, maybe even of this. Well, 2 years, we'll say, because it's a 3+1. So there's a decent chance this comes back to bite you. But for the here and now, this, I do believe, was the only way the Bucks could have gotten significantly better. And I also think, looking at this move and looking at some of the comments that Jon Horst said, where Camille called this out too, he said, we came into the offseason feeling like it was pretty much just us, the Nets, and the Pistons that were going to have the most flexibility in the league. So that tells me this wasn't we think we got a chance at Myles. How are we going to get there? And kind of this came about quickly to waive Dame. They had already set up their mind. They were moving on from him. And I think that kind of reaffirms too, if there's no injury, what we all assume, Damian Lillard is not on the team next year. And there's a trade that's worked out.
I disagree with that last part. I don't think that if he was injured, they would have been moving on from him. I don't paying $50 million to someone who, is hurt. It's not a good situation.
I don't mean.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I didn't know if that was where you were taking it. I don't mean they would waive and stretch him. I mean,
no. You would trade him. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I don't think that necessarily, because I think the team, as much as people wanted to push back on it, it worked when the two were together well enough. It just didn't have to. It wasn't happen in the playoffs. Well, it just didn't. And there were other issues, right? And like I said, injuries prevented us from seeing at least the actualized version of Damian Giannis in the postseason. But if he hadn't gotten injured, I don't necessarily think they're going to move on from him and trade him into a bunch of smaller contracts. Maybe they look to acquire someone who's making a bit more money, and
maybe it becomes a 3-way deal where Drew Holiday gets rerouted to the
something Bucks. Like that. Right. But when he was injured, I think they probably realized, okay, you know what? We could create cap space this offseason by waiving and stretching him. Who are some guys we could sign with cap space with the amount that we would be able to open up? They look at what they can open up. They say, okay, well, the most we can do here in terms of cap space, we can create this much by waiving Dame and getting rid of all of our cap holds on everyone, but probably Gary Trent Jr. And then what kind of player can we get around that $25 million range? That should be enough for Myles Turner. And maybe, just maybe, that's a little too rich for Indiana's blood. That's what happens. I think, but ultimately, in the short term, I mean, the fit's great. People, some of my colleagues at BrewHoop they always kind of made fun of me in years past because I liked Myles Turner as a fit on this team years ago for when Brook Lopez was going to leave. And lo and behold, it happens. But you think about this in a number of ways, right? Like $108 million contract, or, for 4 years if he opts in that last deal, or just 80 for 3. Regardless, on top of that, you have another 20 to 40 million that you're paying by virtue of signing this guy. Like, you have to connect those two. Like
it's $50 million.
This contract, this contract doesn't happen without Damian Lillard being waived and stretched, because I think he wasn't going to, after he was hurt, he wasn't going to be traded for, into someone's cap space or for any assets, because they weren't getting, no team is going to want to have 50 million in dead salary on their books for 1 year, even if he comes back next year and is like,
well, for 1 year, and for a player that realistically by the time he plays again is 36, coming back from a major injury where burst and things like that you rely on your Achilles for, we still need to see how this is going to go.
I don't think any team was going to give up assets for that. But then if he becomes a free agent and you look at, okay, we can give him our mid-level exception, we don't have to give up draft picks or players to get him. The calculation is a lot different. Like, we can, there's no better player we can get on the market for this money, even if he's not playing this year. Like, we'll have him next year, and he'll be, even if he's 50% of what he was this past year, that's great value for $14 million.
Yeah. Are they done? Like, I know Jon Horst said in his interview, we did everything. I forget how he worded it, but essentially we did everything human possible.
Not humanly possible, impossible. Everything within human possibility. When this happened, I thought really, like, this couldn't be the last bullet they had in their chamber. I'm not saying that, Cole Anthony, Chris Livingston, bring back Ryan Reynolds, signing Gary Trent. These aren't the moves that are going to, like, put them back into the
needle.
And as far as doing everything humanly possible, or if this was the biggest thing they could do, or if, I think you had said earlier, it's like, this is what they looked at and said, this is the most realistic or the biggest splash we can make. I mean, that might be true. We'll see. I think they can, they could do something with, obviously, the money due to Kyle Kuzma. It's not a great contract, but you put together his money with Andre Jackson Jr. at his full guarantee, and maybe even AJ Green in there too. You put those three guys together, you add in what's known as the expanded traded player exception. You could take back for those three guys up to $35.5 million in return in salary. Or if you just did Kuzma, let's say, that's still just over about $31 million that you can take back. You're just going to have to include the 2031 first round pick and probably the 2032 first round pick swap. If you want to get anything that is going to move the needle for them this year and put them into, like, the real true blue contenders among the Eastern Conference.
And at this point, I know when the offseason started, I was more in the camp of, like, I don't know who the guy is that you get. Like, before we saw these moves take place, realistically, I don't know who the guy is that you can get with any package that includes your 2031, that, to me, I would look at and say, this is worth it. When Cam Johnson came up quite a bit, that's on the edge for me. I wouldn't. Yeah, when I saw that, fringe at best. Yeah. I don't know that he pushes things forward enough for you. I think everybody's kind of neglecting. He's older than you think, and at that point, you are 29. What you are.
Yeah, and I think seeing that Denver had to include an unprotected 2032 pick,
unheard of for them.
Right. And also alongside Michael Porter Jr., whose contract is not good. So, like, that's having to include that pick is kind of a penalty for that bad contract. But when I saw that, I was thinking, okay, that's a little too rich. And And the only guys I could think of who would be worth including like that 2031 unprotected and also those other assets, the only guy I've been saying and other Bucks fans have been saying for a while is Trey Murphy from the Pelicans. And yeah, I think it's just a matter of whether one, the Bucks are willing to give up both those picks and perhaps AJ Green too. I think you would have to do that alongside maybe Jackson and certainly Kuzma. You need his salary in there. So one, are the Bucks willing to do that? And two, are the Pelicans interested in doing that at all, even to get those primo draft assets? Like, is that 2031 pick projects to be very good? Is that something they're willing to do? Could they get something better from someone else? They've re-signed Herb Jones now to an extension. I think they have a bunch of mouths to feed there on the wing, but still, like, Trey Murphy was their leading scorer last year. So it might be a pie in the sky, but I just think like the price that the Bucks would pay would be dear, but that's no pun intended. But I think that is I think that he's like the only guy I could see out there being worth it and being a needle mover too.
And who knows? Maybe you don't need the 2031 first rounder. I mean, it is
with Joe Dumars
that we're talking about. But yeah, I will say, I mean, that's obviously the biggest name that a lot of people have gravitated towards. But as you just said too, it's not just Kyle Kuzma in the pick and even Andre Jackson. Like, we don't know if Andre Jackson makes the team. So I don't know what the trade value is for him. You're going to have to include something else in there. And that's why AJ Green's name had surfaced with some people over the fact that, well, that's the most valuable guy in terms of the per capita with contract that he has. He's still young. You just brought on a lot of shooting guards or combo guards to this roster, and there's been no talk yet of the extension for him. So that's at least the interesting part there. But I did kind of shift with the Myles Turner signing to say, you know what, it's no longer a non-starter for me. I would say, yeah, I'm open to it for the right player now for that deal to include that pick, because what you did with this Myles Turner move and the Dame wave and stretch is saying these next 2 years are more important than anything else, that we have to field this team, that we may not be viewed as favorites in the East or some of that inner circle, but we still have Giannis. We feel like we're a better team on the floor. We have a chance to enter that conversation and get better year over year. So as much as it makes the future very bleak once Giannis is gone and your assets are gone, I do think this Myles Turner move means, hey, you just at this point have to quadruple down and say, all right, it's on the table.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot would have to go right with the current roster, which is 15 guys right now, for them to be, I think, the 4 seed. Like, we're talking like someone like Trent becomes like a 20-point a game scorer or something, or
Kevin
similar.
Porter Jr.
Him
against you.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think it'll take to get into like real like 50-win territory. But at the same time, I don't think that the Bucks are head and shoulders above anyone outside of, well, the only teams that are head and shoulders above them in the East right now are Cleveland, New York, and maybe Atlanta or Orlando. But I also think that if I look at it right now, there are kind of 2 tiers at the top of the East, and like the first tier is obviously Cleveland and New York, but then the Bucks are sort of towards the, I would say, the low end of that second tier, whereas whereas Orlando and Atlanta, I would say, are on the upper end of that. Yeah. So, and to be clear, like this AJ Green stuff, it's really just pure speculation. Like I've speculated about it. I think other people have, and maybe some people have interpreted that as like, the Bucks are interested in trading him. There's been no indication of that.
There's been no reporting of that. I don't want him traded. You don't want him. Nobody wants him traded.
I don't want him traded either, but I do think that the longer he became eligible for the extension on the 8th, I believe, the 7th or the 8th, and the longer we go without one, the more I'm skeptical he won't be traded, because they won't be able to trade him once they extend him. So like it would take 6 months, and then once he is extended, there isn't a poison pill provision with him, but he does have a new contract starting in the following season. So the salary matching just becomes more difficult. The main point is that he's more valuable now as a trade piece, even though he's making only $2.3 million next year, because that salary is locked in for next year, and the extension would start the following season. But another team would want to have the say on what that extension is
in hand. And the 6-month rule means that's taking us past the trade deadline.
Exactly. They wouldn't be able to trade him this year if it doesn't happen between now and I guess it's like the 6th or the 8th of February when the deadline is. So they wouldn't if they extended him.
It would be like the Lauri Markkanen deal. Last year? Yeah.
If they extended him after August 8th or whatever it is, they can't trade him this year.
So the last thing here is similar to the AJ Green discussion. This wasn't like sourced reporting, but just a few people started to speculate after a little bit of a spat between Cam Thomas and not even between Cam Thomas, just reacting to what Zach Lowe had said, his sources had told him. And, there's a couple of interesting names that we've heard nothing on. Cam Thomas is one of them, restricted free agents. Jonathan Kuminga is another one when you talk about trades and what you could piece together, the salary range that he's looking for with those names we mentioned. The Bucks could get to that range. But what would the Warriors be interested in? What's the market for him? Are they going to sign Al Horford? And is that the hang up? Because it limits what they can actually offer him then. But Cam Thomas was suggested by Kevin O'Connor and I believe one other, I forget who, of, the longer this goes on, I know he's restricted, but I would take a strong interest in teams like the Nuggets and the Bucks if I'm Cam Thomas, as the Bucks especially. How many conversations have Camille and I had, and you guys talk about on BrewHoop of, okay, what's the pecking order? Who's the number 2 scorer on this team? That would represent a major opportunity for Cam Thomas. You can only be the minimum that you're signing him to, and the Nets can match it. So there's that. But, we've seen before, not necessarily for the minimum, but feelers being put out of, look, I don't want to be here. Don't match this deal.
I don't think it would necessarily have to be the minimum if it was a sign and trade, because the Bucks, okay, like we've been saying,
and they're in no danger of reaching being hard capped at the first apron and having to worry about that.
Well, that's true, but I'd have to look at the Nets' current situation, because so Cam Thomas is a restricted free agent, correct? And if the Bucks were to sign him to an offer sheet, they would have to in order to sign him, that they don't have cap room to do that. So they would have to trade salary out. So let's say they signed him to a $22 million offer sheet. That's his salary in the first year of that deal. The only way they could accommodate that would be like they're trading Kyle Kuzma somewhere else. Because then that, something around that figure would meet the salary matching requirements. For the Nets to be able to match that, they need to either use an exception, and that would be more than the mid-level exception to if it was $22 million. So they could not re-sign him by their mid-level exception. They couldn't match with they could match with cap space, or or just they could send out salary somewhere else maybe. So it would be possible to do it. I don't think it's likely, and moreover, I just don't really think it's a good fit.
It's the fit, yeah.
He is one of the great, just pure scorers in the NBA right now. He's got, it's not like he's got the best jumper or he's an elite 3-point shooter, but he puts the ball through the rim better than almost anyone else right now. But he's a small guard who doesn't play a lot of defense. The Bucks waived one of those guys about 18 days ago, who is nowhere near as who's much better than Cam Thomas when he's healthy. And Thomas is going to be playing, off ball. And you look at just who is in the Bucks backcourt right now: Kevin Porter, Cole Anthony, Ryan Rollins. These are guys who can handle and can, at least in the case of Porter and Rollins, you trust as a defender. We'll see about Anthony. Trent, Green, you trust those guys off the ball and as defenders. And Gary Harris, like in theory, you're trusting as a defender, maybe not so much a shooter anymore. But that I just named like 6 guys who are going to be in that rotation, and only I would say Trent and Green and maybe Harris you can play out of position at the 3 in small lineups. So you're looking at a 3-guard lineup then with a ball handler and an off-ball shooter like Green or Trent or maybe even Harris or Rollins, and then Cam Thomas. I just don't think that's I don't think that's enough size to compete in the NBA these days. Just because Cam Thomas is maybe 6'2".
I think 6'4", but it's not.
He's 6'4". You're right, but
not a bigger wingspan. Not that's bigger wingspan, and
that's the same as everyone else. They have a whole bunch of.
It's everybody on their team. Yeah, like to your point, they've then assembled a roster where you have 4 bigs that you feel good about, and then everybody else is 6'2" to 6'4". That you have nothing in between there, and that's why I agree. I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's likely. It was interesting to see a few people bring it up. Jonathan Kuminga has been brought up, and we've seen the Bucks have kicked the tires and had interest in him. That makes more sense to me, but I also don't think it's likely, and I don't think it's a perfect fit either because, like, is he young? Yeah. Is he athletic? Yeah. He's not a great shooter, and you need that around Giannis.
I have always thought that Kuminga is just overrated because he's playing on the Warriors, and it's like, like remember Talen Horton-Tucker on the Lakers? Like, he had a couple of good preseason games, and I was like, the Lakers have their next star next to LeBron and AD. And then you don't hear much about him his rookie year because he's a 2nd-round pick and he's on the Lakers. Then he does some decent stuff towards the end of his 2nd year, and he gets a big extension, and all of a sudden he's like a bad contract, and now he's just in the wasteland that is the Chicago Bulls. I don't think that Kuminga is going to follow that trajectory necessarily, but I think he is benefiting from the same sort of attention that Horton-Tucker did, just because he's playing for the Warriors and because he's a young player, and he was on that team when they were trying this 2 timeline thing, which I don't think that was
move on from.
Yeah, I don't think that was like some like team building strategy or success. I think, but like he is. I'm just gonna say this. I think he's just a younger version of Kyle Kuzma. He's very athletic. He can defend, but I don't trust him offensively. And I mean, if you were like, what more are you going to get from him? Like, is the ceiling for Kuminga, is it even at what Kyle Kuzma was in Washington? I think that's a question because I really don't buy anyone who is thinking he was going to be an all-star at any point. I thought that was just all because he was on the Warriors and because he was a young player who looked interesting. It was just some, Zach Lowe really loved him. So, but I think that was just all because he was on the Warriors. I don't think he's going to just magically develop into some good fit with Giannis, like learn how to shoot, despite being able to be a good defender and, maybe be able to score in some other ways. Yeah, I just don't like it.
I mean, I think his ceiling was 2020 playoff Kyle Kuzma. Is what I honestly
that's probably right.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because to just close it out with the Horst comments, I took the everything humanly possible as we kept all the important guys, or the guys that we deemed the most important. We brought in Myles Turner and created flexibility to do that. And we tried some other things that ultimately fell apart or didn't work, that we were trying for something else. Now, I think everybody's going to assume, for the reasons that you outlined too with the contract figures, it's probably one guy there. But I'm very curious in what version of Kyle Kuzma you get this year, because his value is at an all-time low after the playoffs and the way that it fit last year. That on the one hand, you're probably better served not trying to shop him after that, and at least hope and see, is it better than this? That either it fits and it works out for us for 2 years, or it at least raises the value if we get a full season of him, an off season with him, he bounces back from whatever it was. Maybe it wasn't a thing. Maybe that's who he is. But if he bounces back from last year, that let's just do that instead of selling really low on him.
Yeah, and then line if he's looking better in the regular season or potentially even next summer, then you have another first round pick you can trade, and he's an expiring contract. I think you're right on that. His value will just get higher, even if
he's not as good and it becomes an expiring contract.
Just because it's an expiring contract, right? Like right now, in order to just move him, you would have to attach an asset. But I don't think the Bucks want to just get off his contract and have to give up a first round pick to do it. The Bucks want to get better. So if what you're saying, they tried everything humanly possible. I think that was basically just like we're trying maybe to trade Kyle Kuzma, not like we're trying to get better and use Kyle Kuzma as salary matching. We're just maybe seeing what we can get just for him, and they didn't like the offers.
Yeah, and we talked about this and wondered, is this something they would look into for what you just said about Kyle Kuzma and Pat Connaughton, in that you're going to need to attach assets to it. Now, in the case of Pat Connaughton, you found the right target of, hey, Vasa Micic is going back to play overseas, so let's target this guy and create some cap space. But you're going to need some assets to attach to this. It was second round picks with Pat Connaughton. But I know one of the big talking points was, knowing that, should you do what Phoenix did and basically turn $1 into 3/4 and trade that first rounder for multiple? And now, as we've seen the offseason unfold and saw what the Bucks have done, again, I don't know that was ever even considered by Jon Horst and company. I'm led to believe no, looking at this offseason, but you're more thankful that they did not, and instead viewed that as, if we trade that 2031, we have to get value for it. It's not we're getting picks that we can attach to something to get rid of. We have to get something that makes us better.
Yeah, and how many of those picks has Phoenix even used right now? And they got these picks were not good, to be clear.
No.
So, and
one was this year, wasn't it?
Yeah, one
that
was
like,
I think
the 28th pick or something.
Yeah. And it wasn't because the one they got to draft Malulak was from the Kevin Durant trade. It was Houston's pick, or it was someone else's pick that Houston had. I don't think that's a good idea for the Bucks. That like the Suns were in a pretty desperate situation, right? And they needed first to attach to some stuff to help them. They thought, but
their desperation too was purely financial,
right?
Whereas the Bucks was,
and they didn't make the playoffs. The Bucks at least made the playoffs,
right? And their desperation was financial, to say, I mean, does it make sense for a team that's probably not going to make the playoffs to be in the second apron and paying out luxury tax? The Bucks' desperation was, we have the best player in the conference and one of the 3 best players in the league that is zeroing in on free agency. So like, it's that time of the cadence again where we gotta do something to make him stay here.
Every 2 years, we need to make some sort of a big splash, and we have to move our first round picks in future years in order to prove to him, like, we're trying to surround you with the best possible talent. And I mean, if he signs another extension like he did the last 2 times, okay. I just ultimately think that 2031 pick, like taking that, what the Suns did, I think that is going to be a valuable pick for them too. At least the when they traded it, it looked like, okay, the Suns are in 2031. Like what are they going to be? They've traded all their first round picks between now and then. KD is old and probably leaving. This whole thing didn't work. That pick looks really nice. And they traded for a bunch of like late first round picks in the interim and that's going to be potentially like a very high lottery pick. I look at the Bucks, the 2031 pick, the same way. And if the Bucks were to trade that, it's like, I think, the expression is like you trade like it's not even $1 for like 4 quarters. It's like,
you're getting
for
2 quarters,
60 cents or something. No.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's $1, like you're getting, instead of 3 quarters, you're maybe getting 3 dimes, or maybe if you're getting 3 quarters, you're actually giving up $5 or something for it. I just don't think that's a good idea for the Bucks to do. Hold on to that pick until you can use it for someone who like is a true difference maker.
Yeah, I mean, and look, even if, it's a totally different conversation if Giannis isn't on the team. But even if Giannis rides it out with the Bucks, when 2030 rolls around, he's 35 going on 36, that it's a much different player at that point. So that's why we keep pointing to that 2031 first rounder and saying, like, this is maybe the most valuable asset that's out there, because that component with Giannis, the fact that the Bucks are only signing guys to 1+1, so who knows what the roster is going to look like even next year, that there could be a lot of change, good or bad, for this team over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. So that's what makes that pick even more valuable, and why, I think it increases the chances of, now we are only trading this pick for something that immediately makes us markedly better.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think with that pick, it's like you said, Giannis is going to be 36 by the time it's made. And like, Giannis probably doesn't care about that pick, about what will happen to the Bucks at that point. But if I think the gamble that was made at the trade deadline it wasn't all about getting under the second apron this offseason. It was, but like you were saying, all right, we're gonna trade Chris Middleton. So in the offseason, we can trade what we got back for Chris Middleton, which they decided, okay, that's going to be Kyle Kuzma, plus the first round picks that we'll be able to trade now because we're under the second apron.
Yeah.
And I think it's TBD if that was the right gamble to make, because it's going to be determined by like what the value they can get back for the package that the Chris Middleton trade opened up for them to send out whenever they tried to do it. And if they don't, like, if they decide not to cash in that package, then you can probably call the trade a loss, right? Just because unless you somehow get some really good on-court value from Kuzma in the next year or two.
Yeah, the interesting thing with that is people are going to view the trade deadline all as one for the Bucks. So you look at 2 guys that are still here in Jericho Sims and Kevin Porter Jr. And in the case of Kevin Porter Jr. taking on what we think is an expanded role, where I would assume is an expanded role with no Damian Lillard. And oh, by the way, to the news, I don't think Camille and I got to, that the league determined 4-game suspension for Kevin Porter Jr., but decided it is already
served it because he didn't play at all for an entire year.
So all the chatter at the time of the deal of, well, the league absolved him of charges. They did not. They determined it was worthy of a 4-game suspension, and his time out of the league was time served on that suspension. I'm going to leave that there with no commentary.
Yeah, but another can of worms.
I think people are going to be inclined to view the trade deadline as one fell swoop with all 3 of those names. The reality is, each of those other 2 moves they could have done without doing the Chris Middleton deal. But even if it doesn't work out with Kyle Kuzma, the version that you got in the playoffs is who you get, let's say, for 2 years that he stays in Milwaukee under contract there. I still think it was at the very least a wash in the deal and a move you had to make for flexibility. And you can say, do you feel like you owe it to yourselves of, we just got to see Chris and Dame and Giannis together in the playoffs? I understand that, but also, what's the definition of insanity? Because how many years are we continuing to have this conversation? And I think that was the bigger part is we need flexibility, but also we just don't feel like we can rely on Chris anymore. And he even made the comment of they were on a different timeline than me and they needed me a little sooner than I could have been there.
Right. Maybe a better way to think about it then is to think that like the package that was opened up to them because of the Chris Middleton trade at the deadline, like could they have gotten that same sort of flexibility if they had traded Chris Middleton this
for something else?
Like, or if they'd done it this offseason with him as an expiring contract, because they could have gotten, if they had done that trade sometime prior to June 30th, if they had traded Chris Middleton, they could have got under the second apron and then opened up those first round picks in the future to be traded. So ultimately we won't know. And I don't know. I mean, Chris Middleton's still on the Wizards right now. We'll see how long that lasts. I think.
I mean, I would assume until the trade deadline.
Right. Like if he stays on the Wizards until next year, the trade deadline, then that may have been the right call. Like, because if the Wizards aren't able to trade him this offseason, you have to think they're looking at trading him right now, seeing what they can do with that expiring salary. But I guess no one's biting.
I mean, I'm not surprised because I think if Chris Middleton looks fine to start the season, there's going to be a market for him at the trade deadline. But it's been, it's been an annual discussion in these parts of the health of Chris Middleton, and the league is certainly aware of that. So you're going to have teams that are saying, even though he's an expiring, like, we're not giving up a ton. Like, we're not really giving you assets for this. We'll give you matching salary and maybe a low end asset, but like, we don't know this guy's health situation. We need to see that.
Yeah, I think it's probably what probably will happen is wherever he goes at the deadline, he's going to get bought out. And hey, the good news is that because the Bucks are under the year has passed and the Bucks could at that point sign him, because as long as it's after, I guess, the 6th of February, then he would be eligible. Like the Bucks are eligible to bring him back with a contract, but he is making more than the mid-level exception next year. And if you're a team that's over I forget if it's the first or the second apron, you can't sign a guy who's making more than $14 million, and the Bucks aren't over that apron. So they could be in the running for a bought out Chris Middleton in February or March of 2026.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on the Wizards this year with a roster full of veteran expiring contracts.
Marcus Smart too, right?
Marcus Smart, yeah. And of course, everybody's favorite AJ Johnson, and see what develops there. We've gone very long. One last thing as we wrap here to ask. So I asked before, do you think the Bucks are done? And I don't think we ever finished that conversation. So they currently have 15 guys under contract. Are the 15 that they have right now the 15 that they will have under contracts when the regular season starts?
No, I think I can confidently say that. When you first asked if the Bucks are done, I think it's like, are they done making moves?
Substantial moves? Yeah.
Well, it moves, period. Because I think moving the guarantee back for Andre Jackson opening night, like that tells me, okay, if they can't find some way to trade him and get some value for him, they will waive him at some point between now and, I guess, the end of October, mid-October, whatever it is. Yeah. And then they're going to sign Thanasis Antetokounmpo whenever they can do that. Whether or not, so no, I don't think this is the roster they're going to go into opening night with. Whether or not they have another like significant move left in them, like especially something to address the small forward spot, which is the big talking point around the team right now. That I'm less confident in, but
I'd be surprised. Yeah.
But I still think it could happen. I guess I wouldn't bet on it right now, just because I feel like the one thing I guess I'll say is like, yeah, maybe you think, well, they've tried to do that already by now, or they're not willing to do that. But 2 years ago this time, Damian Lillard only wanted to go to the Heat, and no one was thinking around the Bucks, like, or at least Bucks fans or media, that they could acquire him because he wanted to go to the Heat, and the Bucks didn't have the assets for it.
Yeah.
And then they swoop in right before training camp and they get the deal done. Maybe it's like, did Dame's value come down at that point, or was it just that Miami didn't want to give up what it took to get him? It probably both, but
or a combination too of Portland, just as we've started to hear, we're not dealing with Miami.
Right.
Who else wants this guy?
Right. So could that happen again this offseason? Maybe there is someone that Horst is waiting to see if the asking price comes down on, because they had been calling about Damian Lillard for years with Portland. And I have to imagine when he requested a trade right before free agency in 2023, like late June of 2023, they made another call.
Shot off a text of just making sure you saw our call.
Yeah, like we're still interested in him. And they said, we're working with some other teams right now, maybe. But then 2 months later, 3 months later, it worked out.
Yeah, I think we're pretty aligned. I don't think they're done. I don't think it's anything substantial. I'd be very surprised if that's the case, but we'll see.
I won't be shocked. I'll put it that way. I think it could happen.
You won't be shocked if they do something of substance?
No, I won't be shocked. I won't be surprised if they don't do anything, and I won't be flabbergasted if they do something big. That makes sense?
Yeah, I wouldn't be stunned. Like, I wouldn't be like the feeling we had when they signed Myles Turner. I wouldn't have that feeling if they did something big, but I just don't anticipate it happening. Well, we started this to try to find some clarity on the Dame contract wave and stretch situation. I think we got that, and then touched on a number of other things that I know we've talked about quite a bit on the show throughout the course of the summer. And I think you and I and Yumi and Camille have talked about it offline, but we haven't had a chance to do it on the podcast here so far. Now we're going to release this, and something of substance will end up happening later that day or a couple of days later.
Well, I'll be here if you want to talk about it. Thanks for having me, man.
Van Faez, always good to catch up with you. That'll do it for this bonus episode over the weekend. We'll be back on Monday. We may have Frank with us on Monday to share his thoughts on Summer League and a couple other guests coming up next week as well. That'll do it for today. We'll talk with you once again next week on Locked On Bucks.